She called me an embarrassment right in front of the sommelier. 5 minutes later, that same sommelier bowed and welcomed me as the owner. I didn't argue. I didn't need revenge. I just let the truth speak quietly and devastatingly. It all began with a birthday dinner I was never meant to attend. Not out of love, out of obligation and appearances. It was a cold March evening in Chicago. When I walked into Alder and Vine, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a hostess greeted us with a smile too polished to be sincere. "Reservation for Monroe, party of 4, my sister Brooke said. Her lips pursed like royalty. She didn't look at me. Brooke and I weren't always like this. Kids. We used to play restaurant in the backyard. I cooked with mud and leaves. She took imaginary orders. She once told me I made the best fake creme brulee in the world. Funny how the game stayed with me but not with her. She never did, not since I stopped fitting the Monroe narrative. I stayed a step behind, watching my family perform their usual ritual, adjusting their designer watches, flicking their coats just enough to flash the labels, speaking just loud enough for strangers to recognize their last name. They hadn't wanted me here. Mom said, "It's your father's 65th, it would look odd if you weren't at the table." So here I was, in a dress I'd chosen from a small atelier in Paris. But to them, it may as well have come from a clearance rack. Brooke leaned in. "Try not to order anything too adventurous," she whispered. "Some of us actually know how fine dining works." I gave a small smile. She didn't know the irony yet, but she would very soon. As we walked through the restaurant, I caught the flicker in the eyes of the staff. Recognition, respect, and something else they tried to hide, admiration. None of them spoke. None of them spoiled the moment I had orchestrated quietly, deliberately. Then came Jean-Luc. Tall, composed, impeccable. Jean-Luc was more than just a maitre d'. He was the first person in fine dining who saw me, not as a waitress but as a future owner. Long before the white tablecloths and press mentions, he greeted me with respect. That never changed. He approached our table, but turned directly to me. "Welcome back, Miss Monroe. Your usual table was reserved for another guest this evening, but I hope this one meets your standards." My father choked on the complimentary water. My mother's menu slipped from her hands. And Brooke, her smirk collapsed faster than her last PR stunt. I smiled. "Yes, Jean-Luc. This table is perfect." I hadn't even opened the menu, and already the balance had shifted. Have you ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own family? Have you ever been told to shrink yourself just to make others feel bigger? Do you have? Then you'll understand why I let the truth speak for me that night. And what happened next changed everything. They hadn't always treated me this way. There was a time when I was the pride of the Monroe family, top of my class, early admission to Northwestern, endless internships. I did everything they asked until I didn't follow the path they chose. Dad wanted me in investment banking, said it was the only real career worth having. He even offered to place me in his firm's analyst program, but I turned it down. I told him I wanted to build something of my own. "You want to run a restaurant?" he asked. Like I'd said I wanted to join the circus. "You're too smart for that nonsense, Rachel." That's when it started. The shift. The slow erosion of respect. First it was subtle. Questions at dinner turning into lectures. "Why waste your MBA on food service? Do you really want to work weekends? You'll never scale anything in hospitality." Then came the harder blows. Brooke laughing when I moved into a tiny studio. Mom sighing whenever I wore the same coat twice. Dad saying she could have had it all but chose to wait tables. They stopped introducing me with pride. Stopped asking how I was. Stopped seeing me altogether. But what they never realized was that I wasn't shrinking. I was building. While Brooke was curating fake charity galas, I was scrubbing pans and slicing onions. Knowing that one day they'd book a table under my name and never realize it was mine. I started as a prep cook, then line cook, then assistant manager, then general manager. And when that failing French bistro on Belmont went up for sale, I cashed out my retirement fund and bought it. Every last cent. There were nights I slept on the kitchen floor. Days when the walk-in fridge broke down and I couldn't afford repairs. Once, I held a loan rejection letter in my hands and stood in the snow for an hour, wondering if I should give the keys back. "Are you insane?" my father had said. A failing restaurant in a terrible location? He laughed like he was doing me a favor. But I didn't need his approval. I needed my shot. And over time, I learned something deeper. I didn't need their approval because I never really had it. And in the end, success speaks in silence. And now it finally had. Right in front of them. At Alder and Vine. Silence. Not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind that tightens the air around your ribs, that makes even the sound of silverware feel intrusive. That was the silence at our table. Dad stared into his water like it held answers. Mom kept adjusting her pearl bracelet, avoiding my eyes. And Brooke, well, she had officially lost her appetite. Jean-Luc returned with the wine, a 1982 Bordeaux, presented with a flourish only he could pull off. To Miss Monroe, he said, placing it gently beside me. Chef Michel sends her regards. He'll be preparing your favorite tonight. Brooke blinked. Wait. You have a favorite dish here? I tilted my head. Several, actually. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The bottle's cork popped. A small sound, but it landed like thunder on the table. Dad looked up sharply. That wine, how much is it? Jean-Luc smiled politely. It's not listed on the menu. Translation: if you have to ask, you can't afford it. I swirled the glass, breathed it in, and took a small sip. Familiar. Precise. Bold. Just like this moment. Growing up, I tried to become the daughter she could be proud of. I wore the pearls she gave me. I mimicked her posture. I even applied to the same women's club she once chaired. But no matter what I did, it was never quite enough. Mom finally looked up. And for a second, I remembered what she once told me. People like us don't cook, Rachel. We're served. Now she couldn't meet my eyes. Rachel? What exactly is going on? I set my glass down. Let the pause stretch long enough to burn. Oh, I said softly. Did I not mention? I own Alder and Vine. And the entire Alohan dining group. Dad blinked. The what? Alohan, I repeated. 32 restaurants across 3 continents. Chicago, New York, London, Paris, Tokyo next spring. I saw the disbelief in their faces. So I added calmly. I built it quietly, used a different name. And from the beginning I stayed out of the press entirely. Every PR firm I hired had one mission: keep my face unknown. My name untraceable. To the world I was just a quiet investor. To my family, I disappeared. My gaze lingered on Brooke. You were never supposed to notice. That was the point. Brooke's jaw slackened. You mean, all those places we've been posting from? Yes, I said. All mine. Brooke's phone buzzed under the table. She tried to ignore it. But I caught the screen reflection on her glass. A message from one of her friends. OMG, is that your sister? I just saw a post. She's the founder. Her cheeks flushed. Dad cleared his throat. But you live in that little apartment. I raised an eyebrow. Penthouse. Top floor. Full building. I like it minimal. Brooke leaned in. But why didn't you tell us? I gave her the same look she gave me when she mocked my coat. Because I didn't think you'd care. And now that you do, I'm not sure I do. Jean-Luc returned with the amuse-bouche, a delicate arrangement of truffle foam and microgreens on hand-forged ceramic. He placed mine with quiet care, then offered Brooke a polite nod. For Miss Monroe, this is a preview from our next seasonal menu. A special tasting chef wanted her opinion on. He turned back to me. For the rest of the table, chef has prepared something just as exquisite. The flicker in Brooke's eyes was almost enough. Almost. But we were just getting started. The first course arrived. A saffron-infused scallop. Seared to perfection. Resting in a pool of truffle lace beurre blanc. Brooke stared at it, hesitant. Dad picked up his fork like it might bite him. And Mom, she just kept glancing at me like I was a puzzle she'd never bothered to finish. You don't dress like a CEO, she finally said. As if that were the greatest mystery in the room. I smiled gently. No. I dress like someone who doesn't need to prove anything. But the apartment. The car. The way you live, Dad added. I just assumed things hadn't worked out. I leaned back in my chair. You assumed because you wanted to. It was easier to pity me than to accept I'd succeeded without your blueprint. Silence again. But this time it carried weight. Truth. I took another sip of wine. While you were praising Brooke for her junior PR role, I was hiring entire marketing departments across 3 cities. Brooke's fork paused midair. Her gaze flickered, not with anger but confusion. Her breath caught like she was trying to recalculate everything. I didn't want the spotlight, I continued. I wanted impact. Then I turned to Mom. You know Carla? The woman who served you last time you dined at Reverie in LA. She nodded slowly. I paid for her daughter's college tuition. Because she's the best maitre d' I've ever trained and she deserves peace of mind. Mom's face changed. Subtle, but it cracked. And Javier, I added. My head chef in New York? His father had a stroke last year. I flew him back to Madrid on a private jet. Paid for the treatment. Never posted about it. That's where my money goes. Not into handbags. Not into status. Brooke finally snapped. So you think you're better than us now? I turned to her, steady. No. I think I stopped needing your approval the moment I realized I never really had it. Jean-Luc appeared once more, this time with a soft smile. Miss Monroe, the investment group is here again. They've upped their offer, 12 times projected earnings. Dad's eyes widened. Which group? He asked, his voice suddenly sharper. Morgan and Black, I said casually. They've been trying to buy us for months. He nearly dropped his glass. That's my firm's client. I raised an eyebrow. Small world. Jean-Luc waited. I turned back to him. Same answer as always, I said. Not for sale. Brooke muttered something under her breath. Mom looked like she wanted to cry or apologize, but didn't know how to start. And Dad? He just sat there, staring at a daughter he had spent years trying to make small. Now realizing she'd built something too big to ignore. The second course came and went. A delicate duck confit with heirloom carrots and a red wine reduction. Beautiful. Precise. Quietly powerful. Just like this dinner. For the first time in my life, they weren't speaking over me. They were listening. Or trying to. And for once, I wasn't rushing to fill the silence. Brooke broke it first. So, can I see the kitchen? Just for a reel. We're doing an influencer campaign, and this place would go viral. I turned to her, calm and steady. The kitchen is for staff and ownership only. Health regulations. I'm sure you understand. Her lips parted, closed. She nodded, but her fingers gripped the napkin like she wanted to tear it in half. Mom tried a different angle. Darling, you must let us host something, a party. A fundraiser, anything. To celebrate what you've built. I looked at her. Warm but clear. That's funny. It wasn't worth celebrating when you thought I was managing one place. Dad finally spoke again. You've made your point, Rachel. We underestimated you. Fine. But isn't this a little excessive? I let out the softest laugh. Excessive? Dad, this is restraint. Jean-Luc returned with the next course. A dish not listed on any menu. Chef Michel's newest creation. He placed it in front of me with a slight bow. Chef would love your feedback before we add this to the permanent menu. Brooke blinked again. Wait, you get to approve dishes? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The dish, a seared halibut over saffron risotto, was stunning. I took one bite, then nodded. Tell him it's a yes. Jean-Luc disappeared. Dad stared at me, something shifting behind his eyes. The same man who once said I was wasting my potential. Now trying to do the math on my empire's valuation. I could see it all behind his silence. Not admiration. Just recalibration. You've been eating here for free, I said finally. For over a year. Every time you used the Monroe name to get a last-minute reservation. Every time you rolled your eyes at the staff. I've covered every single check. Quietly. Mom gasped. Brooke sat back, stunned. Dad shook his head slowly. Why? I looked around. At the dim lighting. The walls I'd helped design. The staff I'd mentored. The empire I'd built. Because it was never about money. It was about value. And proving to myself that I didn't need your permission to become something real. The sommelier approached with another bottle. He whispered discreetly. Miss Monroe, should I prepare the wine list for Tokyo? Mr. Thompson is on the line. I nodded. Tell him I'll call back after dessert. I turned to my family. Tokyo opens next spring. You're welcome to visit. But reservations are required. 3-month waitlist. No exceptions. Brooke's eyes went wide. She knew exactly what that meant. Her last name no longer opened doors. She knew exactly what that meant. The name, Monroe, wouldn't get her in anymore. The dessert cart rolled out like a final act in a quiet war. Chef Michel's famous soufflé. Light, impossibly tall, perfectly timed. It arrived with a small glass of vintage port. A pairing I knew by heart. Because I designed it. Brooke stared at the wine label. That bottle costs more than my Chanel bag. I smiled. Good. Then maybe you'll sip it slowly. I raised my glass. To Dad. Happy 65th. He didn't raise his in return. Just looked at me hollow. I don't know what to say, he muttered. That's all right. I replied. You've said enough over the years. I thought it was time I spoke in a language you'd understand. Mom cleared her throat. We didn't know. You never told us what you were building. I did, I said. Every time you asked what I was doing. And then changed the subject before I could finish. Every time you introduced Brooke's internship like it was a full career. And skipped my name entirely. Brooke opened her mouth to argue. But she didn't. For once there were no words. You called me dramatic, I continued. Difficult. Disappointing. But all I ever wanted was for you to see me. I took a breath. Slow. Deep. Centered. And now you do. But not because I shouted louder. Because I built something so real. It speaks for me. Jean-Luc returned quietly. Will you be needing anything else, Miss Monroe? I glanced at my family. Dad still stunned. Mom blinking back emotion she wasn't ready to name. Brooke scrolling her phone. Probably trying to control the narrative before word spread further. No, I said. They have everything they need. Jean-Luc nodded. Very good. I've added the usual gratuity. Brooke's head snapped up. There's a bill? Of course, I said. Even for family. Good business never discounts self-respect. I stood. Smoothed the hem of my simple, tailored dress. Thank you for coming. And for finally seeing me. Even if it took a menu you couldn't afford to get there. I turned to Jean-Luc. Please make sure they're well taken care of. And that this is the last time they dine under my name without a reservation. Brooke called after me. Rachel, wait. But I didn't. I walked toward the kitchen. The place where I belonged. Where respect was earned, not inherited. Behind me, the table sat in silence. Surrounded by luxury. And suddenly, completely exposed. The kitchen smelled like citrus and fire and steel. It always grounded me. Real work. Real people. No performance. No performance bonus. Chef Michel greeted me with a grin, apron dusted in flour and pride. You missed the best part, he joked. I lived it, I replied. He handed me the final menu for the Tokyo opening. Meticulous. Elegant. Daring. Just like him. As we reviewed wine pairings, seasonal adjustments, and service protocol, I caught a glimpse of the dining room through the viewing glass. They were still there. All three of them. Huddled in some kind of damage control. No one was smiling. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Brooke, I'm sorry. For everything. I was jealous and I didn't know how to admit it. Mom. We were wrong. So wrong. Can we talk? Dad. I never saw it. Your vision. Your worth. I don't know what to say. But I want to understand if you'll let me. I stared at the screen. Let the words sit there for a moment. Then I typed one message. Simple. Final. Reservations required. 3-month waitlist. No exceptions. I turned off my phone. Looked around the kitchen. My kingdom. My people. My peace. Later that night, I walked through my apartment. The full top floor of a building I owned. But kept minimally furnished. Not because I couldn't afford more. Because I didn't need it. I paused by the framed article near the hallway. Unknown buyer transforms failing bistro into global culinary empire. Below it, the sub-headline. Unknown. Underestimated. Unstoppable. I smiled. Not revenge. Just recognition. On my terms. I opened my laptop. Tokyo finalization, then Dubai. And after that, who knows? Because success, I had learned, wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about continuing to prove yourself right. Every single day. And sometimes, the sweetest taste in the world isn't a vintage port or the perfect soufflé. It's watching the people who once looked down on you realize they've been dining in your success all along.